Vibarius is an ideal. It is the continuation of the now extinct Vibarium, but it is the extant position within our hearts to vibe with one another.
So, like, in a roundabout way, what he meant was fun. You know, just in a summarized word, fun.
Well, for a while, Vibarius didn't mean anything to me. But he's really grown to become close to my heart. I feel like he's part of me.
So Vibarius is the god of vibing, or of vibation, not to be confused with imbibation, which is tangential. It's Vibarius adjacent. So the god of vibing chooses an avatar during smoke sessions, drinking sessions, anything like that. His original avatar, however, was a plastic one-armed mannequin with no head and no legs, which over time was repaired through his grace and through his gifts to include a head, a second arm, etc. But he has abandoned this shell and he takes on new forms now.
I think he's a symbol of this sort of, I don't even know what to call it, this force, right, that's been growing in society, this just restless boredom eating away at all of us during the pandemic. And Vibarius literally started as like a protest against that.
A few days later, I began to understand the community built around Vibarius and thought that was something I wanted to be part of.
If you had asked me at the start, I would have just said he's just a mannequin. But when you get to the end of the story, Vibarius is less than like an object and more an idea, right? That people built this lore around, this religion, right? Just for fun. And so the idea of Vibarius, right, became, sort of part of expression for a lot of these people as fun, right? And especially in regards to a tendency to just want to, as the name implies, just want to vibe, basically.
At first glance, Vibarius is a mannequin with no legs, one arm, kind of two, with the other one's broken to the naked eye. But many would consider him a god.
The god of vibes.
One more time. It's hot as shit in here. God damn it. We gotta take it. Hot as a bitch. Hot as a motherfucker. It's just funny. I swear to God, hey. Please correct me if I got it twisted, but I can't help but think that we been fucked up on the mission. The way that I've been living got me wanting something different, but I'ma quit my bitching cause I got a pot to piss in. My bills paid, my bed made, my life's good, I just ate. Now complain, it's been flame, get played, this shit great, you can't hate. Every candle I blow out is one less sunrise. Every moment I spend is just one less surprise. Try not to stress and just have a good time. Every time I wake up might just be the last time. Every minute we share ticks down to goodbye. Try not to stress and just have a good time.
This semester at my fraternity has likely been the most eventful of any thus far. While the group of friends was slowly decimated by the pandemic, the entire group was very hopeful for the spring recruitment season. In the meantime, though, the fraternity would be at relative peace between its members, in a time free from internal drama and conflict. Then there was, of course, the Legend of Vibarius, which was definitely the single biggest internal issue of that spring semester. Vibarius, of course, does not begin with the deity that we all know and love. He begins as a concept, an ideal, and a need for a special location. The Vibarium was made as a place to vibe, and a place to find one's place in the universe.
The Vibarium was constructed in the basement over winter break by Trey Grizzle, made out of gym mats, laser light shows, blankets, sheets, etc. It was an enclosed space right here across from the bar, basically for the purposes of getting high and, THC vape pens. The Vibarium in that sense was kind of a religious place. It could be described as the first temple of Vibarius.
Trey named it such as he believed it was underneath another room in the house long dubbed the Solarium. However, he must have been fairly intoxicated at the time of naming the Vibarium because it was actually on the other side of the house, not directly beneath. The Vibarium was made after several brothers complained about the low level of lighting in the basement. So Trey and Adam, in a bid to enhance the basement, decided to add LED light strips to the roof of the basement. With the ability to change colors at will, Trey knew he had something special on his hands. He quickly got to work, moving the biggest TV in the house, a 65-inch LED flat screen, from the second floor lounge into the basement.
So he claimed that it was underneath the Solarium, thus it was the Vibarium. So I started calling it the Vibarium Imperium as it grew and started to expand, just a few feet in any direction over winter break.
He followed this up by moving blue gym mats into the room to use as walls to separate the Vibarium from the rest of the basement. One was used as a floor mat to make the room seem soft and comfortable to the standard outsider. After adding more decorations and setting up the speaker system, the conversion was complete. The Vibarium was created.
I know that the Vibarium kind of started out an idea where we'd section off a part of the basement and, watch movies in it, set up LED lights. And that was like the inception of the idea of the Vibarium, was that over, winter break, we would just have an area in the basement where we could just chill, watch movies, play games.
Because they wanted to deem it like a zone of vibes.
Now, it is important to note that not everybody appreciated the Vibarium at its time, for which I am guilty. For one, I thought the LED lights looked a bit tacky, and the floor mat was doomed to collect dust and mold. As a result, I was the primary advocate for the dismantle, or at least the adjustment of the Vibarium to make it slightly less prone to becoming disgusting. But compromise was had, and adjustment was made, and the Vibarium lived on, in one way or another.
But as far as what that context relating to Vibarius is, I don't know.
Well, as far as I know, it's the room in the basement where Vibarius first showed himself.
The presence of Vibarius makes this the Vibarium.
At some point during the reign of the Vibarium, however, something happened which its creator did not intend. Early that January, in what was largely thought to be an attempt to scare the inhabitants of the house, a mannequin torso, missing its right arm, was placed right at the entrance of the basement. Nobody knew where it came from or why it was there, but the effect was immediate. One by one, the inhabitants of the house went down to the basement to do laundry, work out, or what have you, many of whom being shocked and confused by the mannequin standing in the doorway.
I think he just manifested in our basement.
Vibarius appeared in the basement, actually, right over there. About the time that people started moving back in after winter break, Vibarius came to guard the Vibarium against those who would not vibe, and so he took up his position in the doorway.
Vibarius showed up in the basement one day and nobody really knew where he came from. Just kind of started popping up at different places around the house to kind of jump scare people.
At some point, a piece of paper was even attached to the mannequin, bearing the inscription, "Dance with me," which would start the adjustment of the mannequin to suit Random Brothers' own personal wills. No one seemed to give the mannequin much thought nor concern at the time, but one thing was clear. Brothers were returning to the house around the same time that the mannequin showed up, which meant that they are also being exposed to the vibarium at the same time, and as a result, the vibarium and the mannequin became synonymous with one another.
My first memory of Vibarius would be walking into the basement and getting scared shitless that he was standing directly in the doorway. I think holding a broom at the time, if I recall.
The vibarium had lost much of what made the vibarium at this point, but it still maintained its integrity and purpose. It is unclear how long the mannequin was plaguing the basement. Could have been 1 week, perhaps even 2. By the time it was first moved, most people involved in chapter activities knew of the mannequin in the basement, prompting someone, or something, to move it not 10 yards from where it first appeared, from the entrance of the basement into the elevator.
For a while he was in the elevator, so I stumbled upon him several times in his mannequin form. I didn't really know him as a god.
I remember Zach texting me, I believe mid-March, telling me that you were wanting to film a sequel to Gerald's trial. And that was the first I'd heard of Vibarius, as he was... I don't know if he was necessarily referred to as Vibarius, or just like the mannequin prop we were going to use for the video.
This must have been done in an attempt to move the mannequin to a safer location, as many brothers had started to voice their disdain for the fashion icon, and wanted to cast it from the roof of the manor, in a game they like to call Break or Bounce. The timeline begins to be more defined from this point further, as more attention was paid to the statue of ever-increasing popularity. On January 17th, upon his return to the manor, Bryce opened the doors to the elevator.
Oh man, I have no idea where he came from. I really don't. But I do know my first memory of him. I don't think I'm going to forget it. I was moving back in, and I was moving my stuff back into my room. And I opened this elevator, and, you know, I'm standing there. My hands are loaded with bags and, you know, laundry carts. And I was just standing there just waiting for the door to open. And then it kind of swings open. I was checking myself, making sure that my sunglasses hadn't fell off because, you know, I hung them on my shirt. And I look down, and out of the corner of my eyes, this door opens. I just see this white arm just extending at me. And I audibly yell, right? I think my words were, "What the fuck?" And I'm just staring into the face of this headless mannequin in the elevator. His arm outstretched in one direction, missing another arm, on a pole because he doesn't have legs. And I remember going, why?
Shocked, he declared boldly in the fraternal Slack, and I quote, "I'm about 5 seconds away from breaker bouncing that mannequin in the elevator, so if you want to keep him, come claim him. You have been warned."
I remember him being in the elevator when, I don't know, I think it was like me and Bryce going down to watch The Mandalorian or something, and we just got into the elevator and there was a mannequin in there and we were like, "Oh, what's this? I don't know." Alright. Left it in there. I thought that he might have just been like something that someone found in the attic, because I think there was a time when we were just going through things and just trying to like clean the house and someone just found a mannequin or something. There's a bunch of just crazy stuff stored all over this place.
Soon after, the mannequin was moved, be it out of self-preservation or perhaps somebody else's act of faith, from the elevator onto the 3rd floor in a room long dubbed Grandma's Room. The room had something of a history in itself, being dubbed Grandma's Room by a brother years past who had placed a fathead of a grandmother serving cookies onto the wall of the room. He then replaced a light bulb in the fixture with a blue LED and then proclaimed, "No one can shoot heroin in Grandma's Room." After the departure of this brother from the university, the fathead, along with the blue light and a terrible paint job, remained, as various mattresses and blankets were collected in the room, being used by random house guests to recover from mild amounts of alcohol poisoning. The room continued its decline when Matt decided to place his Bitcoin miner into the room, which ran for weeks at a time, which drove the temperature of the room to an uncomfortable point to where opening the window in the middle of winter no longer made the room cooler. Finally, in late January, the mannequin was added to the room, at some point being dubbed Vibarius, of the Vibarium Imperium.
I think my first memory of him in Grandma's room, under the blue lighting as it cast over him, just kind of seeing him there at the peak of his glory.
After receiving the name, it was quite some time before brothers began to recognize Vibarius as a god. Little g. Primarily, the entire month of February was vacant in Vibarius lore.
He stemmed from when I put a plushie on top of the just random mannequin that was left in the elevator at one point, and people slowly started adding things to him until there was a certain point where they started calling him a deity.
Vibarius, to some, is a god, and to others, just a mannequin with a stuffed animal taped onto his head.
What role did you play in the religion?
I assume disciple, since I interacted with him, spread message, and witnessed him.
I was the satanic figure in the religion, and I find that infinitely hilarious. This was definitely out of my, definitely was born out of my spite for Vibarius. And I remember when you had written the Vibarius Old Testament, at least the first draft, I just remember being, so amused that I was painted as this scheming figure that was constantly looking to undermine the mannequin. And I just thought to myself, that's fun. I can roll with that. And so, in regards to the religion, I was the Satan figure for a little while, anyway.
Well, I'm a follower of Vibarius. I think that the religion serves the purpose of unifying people.
From what I knew, it was kind of loose almost at this point. The one thing that people agreed on is that Vibarius was the central deity of that, but it seemed like everyone had their own personal definition of what it really was. While people were trying to put together some concrete theology or something for it, there were multiple different things that were splitting, right? Because some people wanted it to be the way they envisioned, other people were, like Chris, stepped up and were kind of trying to implement it into his own thing.
I knew his origins, but in order to spread the religion, I had to make it seem like his origin was mysterious and he was suddenly placed here through an act of divine will. So I pushed the narrative that he was a god. But it also came about because Chris had been proclaiming himself as a god, and we needed an opposition.
So Chris's religion, he was making something that was meant to kind of almost be a counter, I think, to that. He was incorporating stuff of that, but I thought they were kind of separate, the thing. He was trying to include Vibarius into that. I know he wrote his holy book, and there was other stuff surrounding it at this point, but I'd like to think they were kind of almost separate at this point, because Chris was trying to adopt things from, essentially, the Vibarium. Well, the Vibarium was its own thing that formed on its own.
In response to this, Chris further declared himself to be the Messiah, as he had once done before, and ordered his followers to destroy Vibarius, separate him, and bring the pieces to him so that he might eat Vibarius and absorb his soul. Long story short, Chris has a weird religion.
The only thing I really know about Chris's religion is that when he came back, he called it the Second Coming of Chris. I don't think there are very many followers of Chris anymore, but I don't know many details.
Around this time, an arm was spotted on the porch of the house, photographed by Zach on March the 7th.
I really felt like the arm was an underrated piece of the Vibarius story. I don't feel like people reacted appropriately to that. He'll open the door, saw the arm, completely ignored it, just didn't really give a shit. He'll never does. Then Zach saw it that morning when he went to class. He thought that Bryce had followed through on his promise to break or bounce Vibarius and had broken the arm off and just left it there. It took days before someone said anything.
So it was just on the porch for days?
It was on the porch for 2 or 3 days, yeah.
That's hilarious.
They were saying, oh no, it's different from the other arm, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, mannequins can be asymmetric. So I had to convince people it was the right arm. After which point Adam claimed that it fell from the sky, which I actually thought was funny as fuck. That was good lore. But yeah, people almost overlooked that. It was in serious danger of being completely neglected.
After declaring that arm fell from the heavens on the 15th, Adam took the arm and reattached it with tape on the 16th, adding along his own modifications, like putting a Supreme sticker on his chest, adding a plush head, and creating an extremity to be attached to him.
Well, he had an anime doll on his head. The arm that I had mentioned earlier was broken, was taped on with duct tape. And he had a condom on his wrist and a massive dick.
They put a dick on Vibarius. I can't do this anymore.
I added his Supreme tattoo, since he's a Supreme Being, and the Almighty Cock.
They gave the mannequin a dick.
Just, I remember there were some people in the room. They were gesturing towards, like his newer additions, like his head. And I remember standing in the frame of Grandma's room, right, which is where he was stored, and just looking at what was happening and going, wow, it's getting worse.
This was around the time that things really started to heat up. Vibarius created a Slack account on March the 14th, which created a great deal of interest from many people. Nobody knew for certain who created the account, but the account did join the Messiah's group chat, a group chat made to spread Chris's religion way back in the day. By the next day, the group chat had exploded in popularity, and it seemed like a holy war was imminent between the followers of Chris and the cult of Vibarius, though it seemed the hold of Chris was fragile at best.
Oh, I mean, honestly, I thought it was you initially. I forget why. I do know why, actually. You tried to @Vibarius like 2 minutes before the account was formed or something insane, and it didn't work. And then all of a sudden it did work. And then I accused you of it, and the Vibarius account replied to me and said, "Nah, man, it's not me." And then deleted it before I could even get a screenshot. So, like, that was masterful. I was pretty fucking sure it was you. Alternatively, at one point he sent me a message during a business meeting, and that was when I became convinced it was Matt, because Matt was the only person not present.
Vibarius lore had consumed most fraternal functions, with everybody either being a follower, a denier, or a supporter of Chris. The only one largely opposed to the spread of their religion was Bryce, who remained to be a follower of Chris.
I thought it'd be fun to be contrarian in the moment. But I also supported Chris because the channel where a lot of this communication was happening, right, was dedicated from like Chris, right, and his own sort of pseudo religion thing that he had going, and I thought it was really fun. So it was more the context of where it was being discussed that I decided, yeah, okay, I'll align myself with Chris. Why not? He's a human being, and I hate that mannequin, so why not?
You'll remember that Bryce said he would throw Vibarius off the balcony.
What's your emergency?
Where is he? Where did he go?
Are you in danger?
Well, Vibarius is missing.
Only a few days following the initial explosion in the Messiah's group chat, on March 18th, 2021, a study group consisting of Alex, Trey, and myself went up to the 3rd floor to receive a blessing from the Vibe God Vibarius and to pray at the feet of the Holy One, when we found, once again, that he had been moved.
It was about 3 to 4:30 p.m. on a Thursday, if I recall. Myself, Troy Grizzle, and you, Putnam Franklin, were in the basement preparing to do some homework for, I bet you it was SolidWorks. And so, before we started, we decided to go get a blessing from the vibe god Vibarius. We went up to the 3rd floor, to Grandma's room, where he's traditionally kept. And at the time, we discovered that there was only a stand and a few remnants of him, basically his cock and his head, around the room, and that his torso had been stolen. It was at this time that I captured a photograph of it.
All that remained of him was his stand, his head, which had been torn off, and some material used to create his extremity. Immediately, we sprung into action, running all over the house to grab our weapons and to search high and low for where, oh where, could our god have gone. From the attic down to Narnia, the entire house was searched. But it was clear Vibarius was no longer in the manor.
I remember it was, it was a little in the morning. I hadn't gotten fully dressed yet because I was working on some classes, and I just remember some commotion outside of my door, right? And it was shuffling from, you, Putnam, and Alex, and I heard, yelling, like, where is he? Where did he go? And then you had stormed off the 3rd floor, and I came out to see what was going on. I asked Matt, I said, what's happening? And he goes, well, Vibarius is missing. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I'm in the 3rd floor talking to Matt, and we start walking down the hall, and you guys come back, and it was, you, Putnam, and Alex just leading the way, and you zeroed in on me, and you went, you took Vibarius, and in your hand you had the club, and you approached me, and I was like, I don't know where he is. And at that point I was up against the mirror, basically, because you had held the club up to my neck, and you were interrogating me on the spot. Where is Vibarius? And I said, I didn't know.
To be frank, I didn't know what was happening until I came out of my room and I saw a few people on the 3rd floor running around and just kind of like, they were like frantically looking for something, and then they said it was Vibarius. He was gone, like the actual mannequin. Their stand was still there and everything else was still there.
I was at work. I missed all of it. But my reaction was, I can't time travel, but I assume it was the same as when Judas got Jesus. Because Vibarius was the Messiah.
I wasn't a worshiper or a follower of Vibarius. It was just something that you guys were having fun with. So my initial reaction just was, oh, I guess that happened.
Torment. It was a certified Don Cheadle word of the day moment. Absolutely.
Well, I guess it wasn't very surprising. There was a big counterculture against Vibarius, so it was really just a matter of time. I think it's a very small sect. I think much of the counterculture is secular.
My reaction was that it didn't feel necessarily spiteful, but it felt more like as we touched on earlier, just like this perpetual feeling of boredom and needing something to happen.
Immediately after the events of that day, some people remembered that Trey had complained about somebody else taking trash to the curb when it was in fact his job to do so. No one would fess up as to why they did it or if they did it, but Zach did come forward with a statement.
Someone sent out a Slack thread or something and said, hey guys, someone took out the trash on my day to take out the trash. Can you guys not do that? I'm not sure why it was important, but that event was unusual, right? So that seemed to mark the beginning of the unusual event surrounding Vibarius.
I had taken out my trash as I do every other week or so, and I had walked out to the curb where the dumpsters were, and I opened up the trash bin. I didn't think twice about it. I just threw my trash in the dumpster, and then kind of thought back. I thought, was that Vibarius in that trash can?
Zach said he believed he saw Vibarius in the trash, but over the course of the discussion and the investigation, I think confidence in that theory slowly degraded.
One thing was certain. Vibarius was gone, and there was nowhere left to look in order to find him. Vibarius lives became the mantra for the followers of Vibarius in the wake of the disappearance, and after realizing that their investigation was only being held back by their continued involvement in the Messiah's group chat, decided to invent their own group chat, fittingly entitled Followers of Vibarius.
So there were effectively two investigations. There was the Followers of Vibarius chat on Slack, and there was the Dark Council of Vibarius chat on Slack. So the purposes of the Followers of Vibarius was to drop tidbits of information to see if we could lure people into a lie. Essentially Adam, really. Adam had been accused of stealing Vibarius because he said that he would come back in 3 days, and he was accused of forcing lore. So the idea was to drop pieces of information that would coax him into talking, hoping to lure him into a lie or into kind of doubling back on a statement, and then discuss it in the Dark Council of the Vibarium. So I was tasked with acquiring such pieces of information and dropping them in the chat to fuck with that.
When he was kidnapped, I immediately thought that was Adam. So we thought that he had taken Vibarius to liken him to Jesus Christ, and so that Vibarius could come back 3 days later. And it was kind of around Easter time that happened. So it just, all signs seemed to point toward Adam, and then after 3 days, Vibarius still hadn't come back, and so we started to point fingers elsewhere. I thought maybe it could have been Bryce, since Bryce was a denier of Vibarius.
I simply was going to find one on Craigslist and replace him. Though that was also my fate speaking.
The followers of Vibarius then formed an inquisition, with the investigators being Adam, Alex, Zach, Matt, and myself. But due to the nature of the investigation, not everybody knew every piece of the puzzle. Some people wanted to hide information from others.
Yeah, absolutely. I worked with Matt a lot. As far as the rest of the cult, no, not really. But Matt was loosely affiliated with the cult. And Matt had a sort of... Matt had a predisposition to basically find out what actually happened. And I saw, a chance to work with him, right, into figuring out, okay, who actually did it. And so he and I worked loosely together, but also separate, because he and I, suspected different people at different times. So
the prime suspect at the start of the investigation was, of course, Bryce, which, for the most part, fully exonerated him. Everybody knew that he would not be the one to pull the trigger, for it would be much too obvious that he had been the one who had done it.
He was really the only person who was actively going against the followers of Vibarius.
My immediate reaction to his kidnapping was, oh, here we go. This is where it gets fun. Because I knew from the start that I'd be suspect number one. Especially because from my perspective, I hated him, right? From day one, I threatened to throw him off the roof. I threatened to, just burn him in a trash can, just because I was just so... I was so fed up with the mannequin's presence in general, just being in the elevator, that, I had grown to actively dislike this mannequin.
The suspect list was built off of a list of the users in the Messiah's group chat, as it was largely believed that nobody outside of that group chat would actually care that much about Vibarius. The second suspect was Adam, primarily due to the fact that he claimed Vibarius would return in 3 days' time. This immediately drew all suspicion to him, as many people thought that this might be his way of forcing lore.
Charlie's apartment was searched, my room was searched, my car was searched. I was blamed, even though I was working about 50 hours that week. And I blamed either you, Matt, or Bryce.
When Vibarius did not return in 3 days' time, the argument was then made that returning Vibarius when he predicted would make it obvious that Adam was the culprit, so he had decided to wait.
I thought it was, you, Putnam, and Alex.
I had 3 primary suspects of at least who was involved. And my suspects were you, Putnam, Adam, and Alex. And out of the 3, My weakest was Adam. I couldn't prove that it was him. I could also not necessarily prove that it wasn't him. My strongest was Alex. I knew that Alex, in some way, was at least involved. But you were the wild card. I didn't know your role and the extent to the role.
Or they
Oh,
reveal
Adam.
themselves.
Yeah, I was pretty sure it was Adam. Because of the whole, like, oh, he'll be back in 3 days bullshit, obvious forcing lore. Adam was just super invested. He just loved to suck that fucking 2-foot foam cock.
I did suspect Bryce at first because he was very, for a long time, very staunchly against Vibarius and what it stood for. Multiple times it said, I'm going to kill that mannequin or toss it out, basically, right? Like, get rid of the mannequin, essentially.
I didn't know who did it. I didn't. And so, at the time, but I knew that it was an opportunity.
About 2 weeks passed, and nothing new was learned. No one could solve the problem, and no one had any reason to believe that Vibarius was even alive at this point. To anyone who cared, Vibarius was likely thrown away in the garbage, never to be seen again, by an unknown persona, in the dead of night. There were some, however, who believed in their god's return. Then, on April 2nd, a letter was placed in front of Bryce's mailbox containing a flash drive, which had on it a video now known to the chapter as birth.mp4.
So the day I got the letter, Zach and I were actually prepared to go out to lunch. We were going to meet down here, actually in the living room. I was coming down the stairs, and I noticed something in front of my mailbox. It was a big fat envelope. I didn't see my name on it just yet, but I was curious, so I walked over to it, and it had my name in patched cutout lettering on the front, and it wasn't even my real last name. It was Bryce Goats, like the animal. And I was like, oh yeah, this is where it gets fun. Immediately I was confused when upon opening the letter. It didn't really make sense. It was really just kind of incoherent, but it was all patch letters and images sort of cut in from magazines.
And in that letter, there was a USB drive, and on that drive, there was birth.mp4.
I just remember in the moment being so confused and finding the USB stick in the middle. I immediately took it up. At the time, Matt and Zach had realized what was going on, and we were talking to them about it. We went up to Matt's room and plugged the USB in, and that's when I first saw Birth. My immediate reaction was just confusion. I knew at a base level that this was to shake things up. I knew that this was supposed to be a curveball, a wrench in the system as the investigation was going.
The Bryce letter itself must have taken several hours to make. And it seemed, from that point on, everything that happens after Vibarius is taken seems to be evidence that points towards you being the culprit.
Yes, I believe I was the group of, 3 of us, Bryce, Tristan, Warren, and Matt and I had all watched it together.
In bereft land, the raven flies. Earth. Peep, peep, we call. You and I look up to see resplendent glory. A raven. We open our mouths to partake of the raven's fruit. The raven, and the raven satisfies strong flowing, deep currents. A desire, but we bite the hand. the meal is insubstantial, we punish the raven. But she knows it not. Hey, W, still hell, hell explode.
There, to the tune of the video known to the chapter as The Crow and the Raven, was the form of Vibarius, beaten and abused, and forced to wear lingerie but looking better than ever. The video was a clear taunt, and definitive proof that Vibarius was not dead, he was, in fact, alive.
I quite liked the film. I thought it was very well made. Full stop.
It's a masterpiece. It is the defining work of our generation.
I like it. I like Birth.mp4. I think it's a really good work of art.
It's a work of art. No, I'm kidding. That thing is probably one of the freakiest things I've ever seen, but it's surprisingly well edited. So I don't know, it had production value. It mostly just matches my mood of when I got the letter at first. It was all just confusion. I was just confused. I didn't know what was happening.
I think it was real fucking weird. Not gonna lie. The dressing up as a cow and pouring milk on yourself is quite the choice. I strongly suspected that wasn't even Vibarius due to several identifying marks not being there, primarily the Supreme sticker.
I think it was made by heathens because the Crow and the Raven is involved, and that video symbolizes a human biting the hand of the god that feeds them. And considering Vibarius is the god feeding us, he would not appreciate that. So I think the people who made it were never truly followers.
I think it was misunderstood when it first came out. I don't think that the person who made the video meant any harm to Vibarius, but that's how it was taken initially.
We had a couple days where we were actually trying to figure out birth.mp4, what everything was for that. And I helped look through some of the metadata on that, which was wiped clean, because sometimes people will leave stuff when they record things in the video, like you can figure out, like, alright, it was edited on this computer, or it was done at this location, or things like that, seeing if there was anything, or even on the date, right?
The important thing about the letter is that it was a delivery for birth.mp4, right? Like, birth was the key because it gave the illusion that Vibarius was still out there and alive, even though I thought to myself, that doesn't even look like the same mannequin. It has legs, both arms. I'm like, that can't be Vibarius.
I didn't think it was Vibarius because they were identifying marks that were not present in the video.
There was some pretty clear damage on Vibarius, obviously, initially, right? He had chunks out of him that was not on the mannequin in the video at that point. So I was pretty convinced from when I saw it, it just was too... I wouldn't say clean, it was just... It didn't have some of the damage that Vibarius had, essentially, and there's not really an easy way to repair the mannequins. So I didn't think it was the same one, is the big thing.
I didn't think a singular person took Vibarius. I thought it was definitely a collaborative effort of at least 2 or more brothers at the time. And so I didn't think that the same person who stole Vibarius necessarily made the video, but they could have been involved or knew about it at least. So I definitely suspected multiple people at play with stealing Vibarius. So I don't think it was exactly the same person.
The level of quality and effort put into it seemed like something naturally you would do, and so it made sense why people were suspicious of you.
Matt, because he does that kind of shit, he has time to do that, and also the skills to do it, and so do you because of your filmmaking stuff. also the Crow and the Raven was involved, and that's your shit.
I thought there was a decent chance you made birth.mp4 because you've gotten pretty good at video editing and different things, and were dipping your toe a little more into that at the time, so there were very few people who really have done video editing very heavily in the past. But I also thought Alex might have done it at that point because he was very heavily involved, but seemed like he wanted to have a fun time with it, to say the least.
There, with Vibarius, however, was another figure, a woman who took the form of a female cow. She danced in front of Vibarius, touched him, caressed him, defamed him. Why did she have Vibarius? Why was she dumping milk on herself? To what purpose? To what end? The letter was mostly garbled nonsense, declaring the commandments of Vibarius. It did not take long, though, to realize that a great portion of this letter was cut out of a bag you would get from shopping at Crest. It was therefore known that whoever stole Vibarius also shops at Crest. This did not narrow it down at all.
I took it upon myself that it would be really fun if I used the fact that I was targeted to guide the investigation. So I set myself up as, the Inquisitor in this whole thing, trying to, force out the suspects independent of the cult of Vibarius.
I wouldn't say I played much of a role, to be completely honest. Well, I did call myself the Inquisitor. All I was really doing was stirring the pot because it was a lot of fun to watch.
The identity of the woman in the video became an object of much speculation and curiosity in the coming weeks. Nobody knew who she was, so she became colloquially known as the Milk Maiden. Brothers scoured the Instagram pages of various members of the sister sorority, hoping to find a familiar face. But it was hard to identify somebody wearing such a baggy cow costume with a great deal of face paint on.
They were looking for culprits at that point very heavily because what they were going off of, at least when it came to that, was they were looking at either who had girlfriends at the time or had a large circle of like women they knew at that point who'd be like good friends of theirs who they could do stuff with, right? Because it's not exactly like you can ask anyone to dress up in a cow costume and like get milk poured all over them and all the other stuff. Like, it was obviously someone they had to be close with, so that narrowed down who people thought it was at that point. Most people would say, what the hell are you doing asking me to like dress up in a cow costume and pour milk all over myself and do this type of thing?
It is impossible to say the amount of hysteria going on through people's minds in the house at this point. Nobody knew where Vibarius was. Nobody knew who had taken him. And nobody knew who had brought in the letter and made the video. It was largely impossible to tell who was on what side. And those who declared Vibarius as a god was a rather large group, with the possibility of liars very abundant. One thing was clear, though. People had their suspicions, and with the video having the Crow and the Raven in the background, as well as the directing choices, people started to believe that Putnam himself, me, had stolen Vibarius and made the video. There was, however, a complete lack of proof. Knowing the suspicion weighed against him, had grown tired of waiting around for a reveal that it seemed it would never happen, especially after the discovery of the pole in the attic by Matt. No one knew who the Milk Maiden was, so he thought it would be entertaining to perhaps find an alternative. Upon the realization that the girl he was dating at the time had a starking resemblance to the Milk Maiden, he decided to take her to Crest, make her buy milk, videotape her, and send the video to the group chat, all with the caption, "I fucked the Milk Maiden." Everyone went crazy and immediately called for a trial to prosecute who they thought was the clear thief and murderer of Vibarius.
Religious fervor is the best way to put it at this point. It seemed almost like they wanted to be crusaders for their god at this point, and were going to find the heathen who disposed of Vibarius.
Everything fit. The video, the Crow and the Raven. He had the Milk Maiden on speed dial.
I called the trial when evidence had come out strongly pointing towards you did it, right? Putnam did it. I was the one that pulled the trigger and said, okay, we're having a trial then.
I think a lot of signs point to Putnam having made birth.mp4?
You really outed yourself, even though you presumably had no role. You made yourself very suspicious and sold a very compelling case against yourself.
Realizing that he likely dug his grave a little bit too deep, Putnam contacted the only person he thought could help, Alex, and asked him to defend him in court.
So I was the defense attorney for Putnam Franklin, who stood accused. Effectively, one was abduction of a religious idol, one was religious intimidation via abduction of a religious idol, and one was sabotage of the investigation.
How much preparation did you put into that?
About 20 hours over the course of 2 days. So I went through old DMs, photographs I'd taken, files supplied by the defendant, to kind of cross-examine them and look for inconsistencies in the evidence.
The prosecution quickly pulled together as well, with Bryce orchestrating the formulation of a team of Zach and Adam, who collectively put about 30 minutes into preparation prior to the trial.
I had maybe half an hour of watching over the birth video and seeing Gerald's head, and I was like, oof, this will get him. Because it wasn't me that called the trial, and then I was just kind of roped into being the prosecutor.
By who?
Bryce Allen Getz.
I'm going to talk a bit about the trial, because there are a lot of moving parts there. Matt was trying to get on the jury, and I was trying to work with Matt behind the scenes to get a guilty verdict beforehand. Matt didn't end up being a juror, but I still ended up propelling, the prosecution despite being a witness. I worked very closely with the prosecution outside of this because I needed the conviction.
Everyone was to wear suits and ties to the event, with Judge Madra presiding over the affairs, using Robert's Rules of Order.
All rise. This trial is called to order. Bailiff, please prefer the charges.
Basically, Brother Franklin is guilty for stealing Vibarius. Too many pieces align. Putnam Franklin wrote the Old Testament that indicts him because it just includes all the evidence that, I guess we'll go over in the trial. I did not prepare an opening statement. I'm just going off the cuff. How impressive is that? Thank you very much. Including, but not limiting to, indicting the cult of Gerald, who only Putnam knew about. There's the man himself, who's at this trial. Indicting Bryce.
My client, Brother Jack Putnam Franklin, stands accused of a litany of crimes against the vile. There are very few people present with greater desire to catch the thief of Vibarius than myself or my client. We've been plagued by a heretic in our midst, thieving, disturbing the peace with letters and videos of obvious forethought and malice. The difficulty, however, is in catching him. The prosecution has manifested several charges, many insignificant, and nearly all of them dependent on a single argument, that Brother Franklin allegedly created the video known colloquially as birth.mp4 with the help of a previously unnamed woman. The defense shall, in the course of these proceedings, deconstruct this notion on 3 counts. Motive, in that Brother Franklin's alleged crimes do not match any logical motive for these actions. Opportunity, in that Brother Franklin has equal or distinct lack of opportunities to commit the crimes with respect to other brothers. And evidence, in that no evidence exists for any of these charges, or that evidence specifically exists which exonerates Brother Franklin. In the lack of motive, opportunity, and evidence, it will quickly become clear that the prosecution has no argument for the guilt of Brother Franklin. Thank you.
Putnam was first called to the stand, and remained there for the better part of an hour while being interrogated by the prosecution.
Would you say that you are a fan of arts and crafts? Can you read the top line there? How do you understand?
How to understand the Bible?
Have you heard that phrase before? The Bible?
Only from Chancellor.
Chancellor. Who is Chancellor to you?
He's my little.
You know this man?
That is Gerald II.
When did you paint him? If you had spent several days writing that script, and then the main character was taken, you would have been quite upset.
Yeah.
Why
I'm not able to proceed with production if I don't have Vibarius. That's why the video hasn't been filmed yet. If I was going to film a video trying to entice the chapter, it would have been Gerald become human.
But
it would not have been.
If you had taken so much, you had put in so much effort to writing Gerald become human, you would have been outraged if Vibarius was stolen after you spent several days writing that script.
I was outraged.
Right.
There's a photo of me putting the club up to Bryce's neck.
There is, but that's just a ruse.
What was the date that you...
A head in the video. an unpainted
The
head.
anime plushie.
Did you not refer to this as Gerald II?
This is Gerald II.
Where's Gerald I?
He's apparently at Tim's house in a glass case, according
When did
to
you...
paper.
So yeah, that implied that whoever did that went and bought another Gerald head, which, unlike the Vibarius mannequin, you can buy for a few dollars. I have an objection to this rhetoric.
Why?
That is, Gerald is a $5 head on Amazon, and anybody can get
Nobody would have known that Putnam cares or knows about Gerald to explain Putnam. That's just too.
Well, it all adds up.
It
It all adds up. They put the crow and the raven in it.
Yep.
So you are a fan of the spoken word poem used in the background of Birth.mp4 known as The Crow and the Raven. Have you expressed that to anyone? Have you shown anyone that particular piece of film?
I think I've shown everybody in the chapter.
So, by my count, this gives no less than 13 parties besides you capable of recollecting the poem. Does that sound right?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all for that line of questioning. Brother Franklin, a lot of the videos we submitted to evidence have 8 digits initially, an underscore, and then 6 digits. Can you explain this file naming convention? So you said that was an old naming convention. I noticed that you also used the same naming convention on the video shot at Crest. Did you create this video? I noticed this naming convention skips birth.mp4, is that correct?
It appears so, yes.
At this point, I still had suspicions that you were part of the group that at least had knowledge of it, or at least had contributed to it. However, I was not sold on the fact that you did it. If anything, I was more convinced that Alex had a role than anything else, especially the arguments he had made during his defense of hyperfixating on, I thought, the editing software. You know, he argued that point for 15, 20 minutes, and it was such a weirdly specific thing to focus on. And I had known at that point that this was something that was like carefully rehearsed, right, carefully placed. And, you know, Alex is a smart guy, and so I kind of thought in the moment, he probably knows a bit more than he's letting on.
Followed by him were various members of the gallery. Bryce, Channing, Charlie, even someone that many thought could be the Milkmaiden.
Okay, I was on the stand. Adam had been of the belief that I had brought Vibarius to the manor and that he was my mannequin. So I was called to trial and asked to testify, and I testified and gave my version of the truth.
Do you know where Vibarius came from? What do I do now?
Were you aware that Alex had brought Vibarius to the manor?
Objection. There is no basis for this.
There is basis.
What was the
I would
question?
love to see evidence then.
I was told several times about your intentions with him, like to jump scare people in the manor.
Again,
And
objection. There is no evidence for this.
I also helped you move him to Earth.
This is true.
Question.
Do you have evidence that he is? Yes, I do. Then please go for that.
Objection. Shouldn't this be during his questioning?
Secondary objection. No evidence was entered into discovery.
We're not worried about that.
If you have questions
None.
of the witness, please ask them. I already asked it, and she lied under oath.
What time is it right now?
I object.
Are we still on for dinner at 7:30 Monday?
Yeah.
No further questions, Your Honor.
I was starting to think it was Alex because when I presented where he came from during the trial, he committed perjury through Channing.
So Channing committed perjury, not
Channing committed perjury. Alex also denied things, though it wasn't under oath. He deleted our Slack DMs prior to the court.
So initially I was pretty nervous because he had like some vaguely legitimate claims. People kind of believed him at the beginning. I think people stopped believing him after the trial because he tried to enter in evidence that I had stolen Vibarius. I had it thrown out of the trial on the grounds of illegitimate discovery. And then after the trial, he would say, you know, oh, I still have this evidence, blah, blah, blah. People would ask him to show it to him, but he never did. He didn't have shit. He thought I deleted Slack messages. I didn't. So after that, he would say, oh, I have evidence, and then he didn't show anyone, and I kind of worried about it last, because I'm like, what a fucking dipshit. Channing took the stand, and he tried to ask her directly, do you know the origins of Vibarius? And she said no. which definitely threw him off guard.
How did you hear of Vibarius is being stolen?
I was quickly approached and yelled at.
By who?
By
The defendants?
it was a Putnam. Alex, Adam was trailing. Putnam held the club up to my throat.
That's false.
Accused me of doing it.
Did you?
No.
Are you really just hoping for someone to slip up and say yes?
No, I know it's Putnam. Okay, so anybody who would have walked in front of that mailbox probably would have seen that letter and have been quite suspicious.
Well, yeah, considering how the envelope had my name spelled out in patchy-ass letters, yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, do you think anybody, particularly Putnam Franklin, would have seen that? Or if they would have seen that, they would have commented on it, perhaps in Slack?
Probably. I mean, you comment about having mail all the time, so if somebody discovered the letter or had seen it, I probably would have anticipated a Slack message.
I have a question to witness.
Wait, this is intimidation?
What are you doing with that?
Do you know what this is?
That's your line club.
Do you know the name of it?
No.
Okay. Have you ever seen this before?
Yeah, you held it up to my neck.
Okay. Did you not, on several occasions, threaten to throw Vibarius off the balcony?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Okay. Judge, do I have permission to treat the witness as hostile?
What?
No. Just for the record, do you recognize who this is?
Is that Gerald?
He does.
The longer I stayed in the trial, the more of a liability I would be, especially because I knew more than I was letting on about the whole situation, especially in regards to, you know, what was happening in the background, especially with the investigators. It was a better move for me to just stay in my room, do my work, because, you know, I had an assignment due that was, you know, pretty close. It was better to just stay in my room, do my work, then do my part in the trial, because I knew that the questions that the prosecution were going to put forward for cross-examination were going to immediately exonerate me. And so that was what I was trying to do in the trial, was to get some heat off of myself as well. So that's why my witness testimony was super important.
I mean, Bryce was just a member of the court. He was not in the jury. He was not involved in the trial. He was just audience. Audience is not involved whatsoever. His opinion did not matter.
So you don't think he had any influence over the trial?
No.
Even though, at the time, I thought you had known more than I had initially thought you did. But the thing is with the conviction, if I could get a guilty conviction, then it pays off even better if it's the person who didn't do it. Because then the requirement would be that they bring back Vibarius, except he doesn't come back. So the goal of the trial was to make sure that the mannequin never gets back. It was not necessarily just to convict you because you did it. Even though that's what Zach was doing, that's what Adam was doing. They were doing the trial because they thought you did it. I was doing the trial because I wanted the mannequin gone for good.
Do you drink milk? When you do, what flavor? What is the milk that you drink? If you do.
Regular kind.
Let me know that regular milk is not a thing. Okay. Recognize this person. Is it you?
No.
Do you own a organ?
Oh, look, no.
I got nothing. Have you ever dressed up as a cow? Have you ever poured milk on yourself?
No.
Prosecution rest.
Jamie, when you rose and noticed that you had dirt in your knees, have you been working outside today?
No. I'm not dirty.
I'm probably wrong. I was going to say that you killed Vibarius and buried him.
Oh, no.
I would like to say I've never seen Vibarius in in person, so I've seen several pictures of Vibarius.
I'm told that you searched your own apartment for Vibarius.
I did when I was accused of stealing Vibarius. I took my roommate, who had so many questions, took her through my apartment with several people on the phone and said, do you see a, can I curse if it's a quote?
Yes.
Do you see a fucking mannequin in here? To which my roommate said, no. And I said, does it look like I can hide a fucking mannequin in here? To which my roommate said, no.
So not only have I witnessed that Vibarius was brought here by Alex.
Again, objection. There is no evidence for this.
So then he called up Charlie, and he asked her, but she said she had no idea. Which was great, because not only did it corroborate Channing's story and make him look like an ass, it also threw him off for the rest of the trial. I attribute that to part of my win.
So you enjoy this kind of stuff, right? Writing all this lore, writing all this on the board.
Yes, I did all of this investigative research. I don't think I would have done that had I actually known who did it.
Would you not though? Because you could have done it yourself and just are living for the chaos that's created. You did plead guilty to creating chaos, right?
Yes. That's I pled guilty to that because I claimed somebody was the milkmaiden that isn't actually the milkmaiden.
I do not believe we are getting any closer to the truth in this trial. And I believe if we follow that pattern, that we will spend the next 2 hours here in circumstantial evidence and find out nothing.
Objection? They should not be talking to the jurors outside of the trial.
Oh, correct. So you should be dismissed anyway.
So no, you should be held in contempt.
Oh, that's crazy.
I'm sorry, Zach.
Third question.
For what it's worth, I second his request.
I will swap them two then, I guess.
I was going to say that there was also discussion of the trial happening at Brahms between the defense and the other.
There was, because he was at a trial
even,
member at the time.
It's an even draw. They were each had their own juror to talk to.
Actually, that's true.
We didn't talk about the case, though.
We definitely did.
Whoa! We talked about the other thing in relation to...
He lied!
No. We talked about Vibarius being stolen. We didn't talk about what Putnam was accused of.
Technically true.
Okay, that's actually a very
He
important
was so
I am calling a mistrial then.
Boo! No!
Yeah! Putnam, you won a mistrial.
No, I want to be found innocent.
The trial took a recess, and upon returning from it, the judge determined that both the prosecution as well as the defense had conspired with the jury in the time off, so a mistrial was declared. The first 2 counts would be tried at a later date, with third count, the one that Putnam pled guilty to, he was found innocent for.
With your actions in the chat, like suggesting that you knew who the milkmaiden was, just the context of the video, it being, the crow and the raven, which was like your thing, it was kind of at least a slam dunk to at least get 1 charge. And we did. We got a lesser charge than what we were looking for. But it's fine because it accomplished the goal in that it kept the heat off of myself and it kept the mannequin out of the house.
Most of the evidence I brought was circumstantial, admittedly, but I worked with what I had, and then it wasn't enough for the juror to convict.
Nothing of note happened for a couple weeks following the trial. It was largely thought that nothing of note would really come out of having a second trial, so though the trial date was set for a month in the future, it didn't really seem to loom on anybody and nobody was really preparing another case. For some, it was clear that Putnam was guilty, and there was plenty of evidence to prove it. As for Putnam, it became clear to him that he was being deliberately and carefully framed, proved more precisely by the existence of a Gerald head in birth.mp4. Someone was definitely out to get him, and he didn't know what would come of it. It was again a time of calm for the chapter. Though no one knew what had happened to the beloved god, it felt like his reappearance was no longer just around the corner. If he was going to reappear, Wouldn't it have happened already? From what was understood, no one knew anything, and everyone knew nothing. Then, at one meeting, someone decided it was time to come clean. Asking for the gavel for Putnam, shocking him, Putnam handed the gavel to Ty, also known as jury member number 1.
I killed Vibarius. I snuck out the second story onto the stairs, walked up the stairs to the third story, went down to Grandma's room, took Vibarius off his pole, ripped off his stupid anime head, tore off the ridiculously long black dick you guys had put on him, and I then proceeded to carry him down the stairs and throw him in the trash.
With the details we were learning at the time, it seemed less and less likely that that was the case, because Zach himself had lower confidence in that claim over time.
His kidnapping was more of a murder than a kidnapping. He wasn't taken, he was, thrown away. I had taken out my trash as I do, and I had walked out to the curb where the dumpsters were, and I opened up the trash bin and saw what I now realize was the bosom of Vibarius lying, face down in the dumpster. I didn't think twice about it. I just threw my trash in the dumpster and then, kind of thought back. I thought, was that Vibarius in that trash can? And come to find out, it was.
It was getting real fucking weird. About time to, as all good religious figures do, die. And mainly because I think you guys were crossing a really weird line, giving him the abnormally large black penis. That seemed, one, really weird, because if it gets out that we have a mannequin with just a giant dick, that's probably not a good rumor for that chapter to have. If it got out that it was a giant black dick, that might be construed as racist or something. Man, you guys just gave me an alibi right off the bat, and I was like, fuck, alright.
What was the alibi?
Oh, you guys just thought I didn't care and didn't do it. You just assumed that it wasn't me.
Would you believe it if he said he threw it away because somebody attached a cock to him?
Yes. Yeah. I would believe that. I would believe, because at that point it just becomes stupid.
It kind of all made sense. Ty gets fed up with shit quick and does throw things out of the manor pretty frequently.
Well, how was my reaction? I was kind of shocked, to be honest. I wasn't expecting him to get involved because he seemed very, very distant from the whole thing to begin with, right? He didn't care a whole ton, it's what it seemed. Because I was sure it was someone else at this point. And how it went down just surprised me the most at this point. It wasn't, super ridiculous. It was just very reasonable how that mannequin gotten rid of.
As you could expect, the room went into an uproar. It was revealed that he had taken Vibarius from Grandma's room and thrown him into the trash can, placing a bag on top. After getting bored waiting for someone to take out the trash, he decided to do it himself. He wasn't doing anything better that night. Zach had, in fact, seen Vibarius in the trash, and had done nothing about it, not realizing that that was the god that he would once care for.
So on the one hand, caught me by surprise when he was like, yeah, I threw it away. But on the other hand, I knew he didn't like it. Just didn't like passing comments that he had made about Vibarius. So, I knew he wasn't the biggest fan of it. I just thought he was more indifferent. But, looking back, it makes sense that he threw it away. The genius part of this was that he was a juror in the trial. So there was no way he could lose that situation, which I thought was crazy, hilarious even, how effortlessly that just paid off for him. Because he, to my knowledge, he didn't put any active effort in any of this. He just threw away the mannequin and didn't say anything.
Being put on the jury, that was really interesting. My main goal was to sort of derail the trial, or derail a verdict. I wasn't going to let the defendant be condemned for actions he didn't take. I think I played my part beautifully. Maybe purposely going to dinner with the prosecution, violating some legal proceedings, and just having the entire case thrown out.
After that, Ty sat back and did nothing as the group had delved into speculation and chaos. Who then had made and delivered the video birth.mp4? Where did Vibarius come from? Next, Alex took the gavel and took responsibility for making the video, as well as delivering Vibarius and his arm to the house.
Channing got that mannequin in about 2018, I think, from her friend Tatum, for whom she traded $10 in a Chick-fil-A sandwich. She outbid somebody else who had actually bid $50 because Tatum has never learned how to drive and can't go to Chick-fil-A. So she valued the Chick-fil-A sandwich very highly. Over winter break, Channing and I were doing renovations on her parents' house, and we found it. They didn't want it. She didn't really want it. So she said, let's put it in the manor to see if anyone notices.
Alex and I came together to drop off Vibarius initially. He is the one who went inside the manor and left him in the basement, and Adam West caught him doing that.
I brought it down into the basement where Adam saw me, I think. I think it was just him. And that was when I placed it up against the door. So I moved it up to Grandma's room because I thought, what's more horrifying than being like drunk as fuck at 3 a.m., stumbling into Grandma's room and you see Vibarius? Like, I would probably shit myself. It'd be horrible.
Driving off, we realized that we had left the arm inside of our car. Later, we left the arm on the porch.
I really felt like the arm was an underrated piece of the Vibarius story. I don't feel like people reacted appropriately to that. It was really very well planned out. I had my dad drop it off. I had to wait until several days later when somebody told me about it in passing, claimed to be, mock excited, which the waiting fucking killed me, by the way. It took days before someone said anything. So I had to go out there, pretend to be shocked by it, run out there, try to match it up, convince people it matched. They were saying, oh no, it's different from the other arm, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, mannequins can be asymmetric. So I had to convince people it was the right arm, after which point Adam claimed that it fell from the sky, which I actually thought was funny as fuck. It was good lore. But yeah, people almost overlooked that. It was in serious danger of being completely neglected. I made the letter, and Channing made birth.mp4.
Birth.mp4 actually didn't have any new footage on it. It was entirely ripped off of, I think, 2 photos of Vibarius that had been taken by other people, and then a video that I had made with my friend Tatum in high school. I had decided to make the video because nothing had happened with Vibarius for a really long time. So I thought that there would be a lot of clues in there that would kind of give people a stir, get people talking about Vibarius again. I did predict that people were going to initially blame Putnam because of, well, it's a video and Putnam makes videos, as well as the audio being something emblematic of Putnam. But I didn't think that people were going to carry on with that narrative for very long. I thought that they would think that he was framed, which he was. But they didn't get past that. When I released the video, or made it rather, I thought that people were going to realize that it was an older version of Vibarius before his arm had been broken off, and that they would use that to deduce who brought Vibarius. Instead, they used the video to deduce who had stolen Vibarius, and they thought that it was a ransom video, which was not my original intention. I think that people misconstruing my video added a lot of depth to our story, and it brought in a lot of new players. I think previously there were only a few of us who even cared about Vibarius.
We wanted something obvious. Putnam had made a video at the time for the Jax Film Festival on YouTube, and so people were familiar with the fact that he was making videos, etc., and that he liked The Crow and the Raven since he was the person that introduced it to the house. It was easy to have a cop-out and say, oh, it was Putnam, blah, 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 which I could then redirect to somebody else.
In the video, birth.mp4, when the exercise orb is being thrown at Vibarius, that's when his arm broke off?
That is. It's cut about a half second early. We actually wanted to include more footage, but unfortunately that's where it was originally clipped, and the files were on a laptop, which was sold. So there was no way to get more footage of that fall. That ended up working in our favor, because people actually thought the video was made after Vibarius was taken, due to the timestamp, the erasure of the metadata. Neither of us know what the fuck metadata is or how to erase it. That's just when the shitty program compiles everything all together, because Animotica is some online bullshit. And so it takes all those files and produces a new one. So people were of the belief that it had been made, like, 2 days after Vibarius was stolen. Which was great. I was able to convince people that the thief and the maker of the video were the same person. Which, convincing people the video was one person or another was always the goal. But being able to tie that to the thief was huge, because that let me take different circumstantial evidence, piece it together, claim it was someone. When that fell apart, pick someone else. In reality, it was supposed to depict Vibarius before he was ever brought to the house.
Like the stuff with the mannequin?
The stuff with the mannequin was recorded at least 2 years ago.
That is not a plot twist I saw coming. Wow. Whoever's behind that then... So, was it you?
No.
No. That's incredible. Who would have known about Gerald back then, is my question. 2 years ago, like... Isn't Gerald's trial like 3.5 years old or so?
Yes. I don't know that the head in the video had anything to do with Gerald. It was just a good coincidence.
Wow, that is insane to me.
Yeah.
At the time, I had assumed that they had just gotten another mannequin and just dressed it up and were trying to taunt you guys. I thought it was just, haha, we're pranking you. And they were trying to insinuate that they had stolen it, even though I had good enough information that it had not been stolen.
As I mentioned, I wasn't super surprised on that. I was very heavily suspecting them to begin with, as in it was kind of two people at that point I was split between on that.
When Putnam said that he knew the Milk Maiden, my immediate thought was, oh good, somebody else is going to take the blame for me. I don't have to do anything. But then Alex became his defense attorney, and I started to have conflicted feelings because I like it when Alex succeeds.
So you wanted me to be prosecuted?
I wanted Putnam to be found not guilty on all 3 charges. And when he said that he knew the Milk Maiden, which he did not, it made me so angry because it was evidence that nobody else except for me could dispute. And so I had to sit there silently, watch himself dig into a hole. I'm the only one who has a shovel that can help him get out. And he just kept digging.
It really is a slam dunk for him that he's the defense attorney. So, I don't know. I thought that was a perfect play, especially in regards to the stuff he did do, like the film or the letter. I thought that was super clever.
Did you intend on making something akin to birth.mp4?
No. I intended on putting a mannequin in the doorway and scaring the shit out of people.
Okay, so you had no intention
None.
on making a video out of it?
Nope. I did contribute the name Vibarius of the Vibarium Imperium because it sounded Latin. I thought that was kind of funny. That was really the end of my involvement for quite a while. It was moved around. I did move it to Grandma's room from the elevator. That was pretty much it. Other people modified it, put on the cock, the head, the Supreme sticker, attached the arm, etc. And that was kind of when I started to jump back in, was when people really got ramped up and got excited about it. Because originally it was 3 or 4 people that had some cursory interest in it. And I didn't even know as many people were interested in it as they were, because I wasn't in Manor Therapy, and that was where a lot of the shenanigans went down early on. So it wasn't until the creation of the Messiah's chat that I really got back to being involved and started to formulate some new plans for Vibarius, when I realized that people had an interest in him.
Okay, so did you want to make the video before or after he got stolen?
Probably after. I credit his being stolen with the biggest advancement of lore in the story of Vibarius, truly. I mean, like, what's noteworthy about Jesus except that he was crucified? He was a carpenter, right? But he got crucified. That's the interesting part. And then he came back. That's fucking crazy. Vibarius similarly gets stolen, and that's really when the lore explodes. That's when things kick off. Prior to that, I had very little plans for the lore. That was the best. It was the best. I would give Channing updates anytime anything cool happened, because it was her mannequin. She was kind of invested in it. So it'd be great to see the Messiah's chat blow up all of a sudden, despite having like 10 total messages sent prior to Vibarius, suddenly having like hundreds sent over the course of a month or 2. I loved seeing when the account was created for him. I mean, it was literally 100 and some odd messages, a discussion just about the topic of Vibarius having a Slack account. I mean, it's fucking awesome. It was joyous, I would even say. So anytime there was some sort of shenanigan and I got to tell her, I would be like beside myself with excitement. I would be giddy. I live for this shenanigan. Honestly, I thought it was you initially. I forget why. I do know why, actually. You tried to @Vibarius like 2 minutes before the account was formed or something insane, and it didn't work. And then all of a sudden it did work. And then I accused you of it, and the Vibarius account replied to me and said, "Nah, man, it's not me." And then deleted it before I could even get a screenshot. So, like, that was masterful. I was pretty fucking sure it was you.
It was me.
It was you?
Yeah.
I fucking knew it. At one point, he sent me a message during a business meeting, and that was when I became convinced it was Matt, because Matt was the only person not present.
I found a Slack bot that allowed me to send messages at a predetermined time, so I just decided to send you one at 3:10 on a Sunday.
That is the most technologically advanced thing I've ever seen out of you, at the very least. That's insane.
Alex kind of dug himself a hole that I couldn't really dig him deeper in.
Why did you continuously claim that Alex had brought Vibarius to the house?
Mostly inebriation.
Adam. Fuck him. He kept trying to tell people that I brought Vibarius here, even though I specifically told him not to. And my reasoning wasn't even that I don't want to get caught. My reasoning was that it's much funnier if nobody knows where it came from. Like, this is fun. This is great because we had a semester-long shenanigan. But the reality is, if I showed up, told people, hey, I'm ringing a mannequin by the house, nobody would have put a cock on it. Nobody would care when I brought the arm by. It probably would have still got thrown in the trash, like, at the end of the semester. Nothing interesting would have happened. There would have been no letter, no trial. Like, it would have been absolute bullshit. So keeping the origin secret is what sparked the secrecy to everything else that was done to him. Like, nobody wanted to admit to shit except for Adam, who said, oh, I put on anime head sticker, whatever. He was the only person that admitted to shit. So other than that, everybody was super low-key about it. Nobody wanted to admit to anything, and I thought it was more fun that way.
So according to our constitution, and unbeknownst to me, you guys had pledged Vibarius, and according to our constitution, any brother slain by another brother, the fratricider assumes all of the fratricidees' positions. So I accidentally ascended to godhood, which is kind of ironic, considering I am probably the most atheistic member of this fraternity.
Vibe is things involving Vibarius. You can reverse that as like ebiv, and I'm presuming that is the opposite, and in this case, purgatory. I hope all the people who took Vibarius and desecrated him in his physical form, of course, go to ebiv, away from the vibe, and never experience one again.
I wear Crocs.
Fuck you, Bryce.
If you could tell Vibarius something, what would you tell him?
Tell him that I'm proud.
If I could tell Vibarius something, I'd probably say, I'm so sorry you had to be involved in this.
I love you.
When is he coming back?
I'm sorry that Ty somehow fucking thought the cock was racist despite it being the only foam we had on hand. It's very clearly not a racial thing. It was just fucking funny.
Thanks for the fun times, I guess.
See you in hell, I guess.
That's basically all that happened, and it kind of wraps everything up.
So, was that 4 brothers?
There were at least like 4 brothers involved, and doing things completely independently of each other.
And so when you posted the video of you buying milk with that girl, you were just fucking with everyone.
Absolutely.
So you really, like, I tried to believe you the entire time. You really weren't involved.
I had literally nothing to do with it.
I'm so glad. I defended you, not from the beginning. At first, like, the case was brought to me, and I was like, my first hunch was like, I don't think the video was made by him. I could be wrong. It all wraps up in a way that's conclusive, and I'm glad that it wasn't more serious than it had to be.
All in all, I think it was a rather disappointing end to the Vibarius saga. We didn't find out where he went, but he still lives on within our hearts. Within many people's hearts. Thank you for watching. I hope some of this made sense.